Right. Yeah.
All right, everyone ready? Here we go. So we've got Brian Keating with us here for another Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. I've known Brian for over 20 years now. Brian's an amazing explorer. He's been to over 50 countries. He's traveled to every continent. He's gone in jungles, deserts. He even had the privilege of taking me when I was a young man into the jungles of Guyana. And when I first met him, it was basically a life-changing event. I heard his stories. It made me realize that you can do amazing things in this world. And from that moment on, I decided I was going to somehow be like Brian Keating. And it's been my absolute pleasure to know him and get to do adventures with him in the past. He's come visited me and working on projects with Planet Madagascar in Madagascar. And he's been a real inspirational person. I think all of you will find the same after watching this talk. So I'll put it on to you now, Brian.
Okay. Okay. Hello. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Oh, that's well. It's fantastic to meet you all, and it's great to be a part of this whole program. And I thought what I would do is talk a little bit about how I got to where I am right now. I'm a conservationist, but I started off at the age of 12 bird watching, and I'll show you something right here. That's the most important tool I got. I was 12 years old, and it was this, a pair of binoculars. And a pair of binoculars basically showed me the world. It showed me the twinkle in the eye of the robin on my front lawn. It forced me to slow down and to look at things. And now my binoculars are my most trusted friend. I take my binoculars everywhere, and I use them all the time. And it just opens up nature, and I find it slows me down and allows me to see things. And at the age of 12, I started getting an interest in birds. And birds drew me outside and invited me into the forests, onto the ocean side, down creeks, by ponds. Any place there was where birds existed, I went with my binoculars, my most important tool. And in fact, I've even made a pouch that my binoculars fit in, so they sit on my belt. So I wear them right on my belt like this, so that they're not bouncing on my neck. They're always with me. They're a nice size binocular. They feel good in the hands. And I use those to look at animals. And that's what allowed me to start to check out what made nature tick. So I started to get an interest in nature, and I started to explore different areas. And then I joined a natural history club so I could have access to those areas, because of course, when I was 12 years old, I didn't have a car. So I was able to get driven around by other people that had the same interests as me, and we started to explore these areas. And I've done that all my life. When I was in high school, that gave me a little bit more opportunity to move further afield. And then I started backpacking, I started camping, I started mountaineering, I started canoeing, and the world just got more exciting the older that I got. And always with my binoculars, I went out there to look at things. And then who would ever guess that I would eventually end up in college, and I met a fellow who basically was making his living by talking about nature. And so he basically introduced me to the idea that sometimes parks and different organizations hire people to take people out into the forest bird watching and to talk about nature, to talk about flowers, to talk about mammals, to talk about birds. And that's where my career really started to take off. I worked every summer, and in the wintertime, I went off hiking and skiing and playing, and eventually I got a full-time job, and then eventually I got a job at the Calgary Zoo, and I worked at the Calgary Zoo for almost 30 years. And about 7 or 8 years ago, I retired from the zoo, but I'm still out there leading trips, just like Travis is doing. I'm taking trips. I just got back from Africa just a couple of weeks ago, and I was in Zimbabwe. And where we had incredible experiences with elephants. And we met a conservationist who actually was the fellow that figured out how to move whole herds of elephants from one park to another park without hurting the elephants. He would tranquilize them, put them to sleep in parks that had too many elephants, and then they'd move them to other parts of Africa where there were no elephants, where the elephants had been poached out. And after they went in and developed a good, strong anti-poaching program with good rangers, well-trained rangers, well-equipped rangers, then they brought the elephants back to the park. And so meeting people like that, I have found absolutely amazing. And then when I was working at the zoo, I started to develop television programs. And just this coming weekend, the National Geographic Canada is going to air 4 television programs that I've produced over the last number of years, including from Madagascar, where I met up with Travis and his wife a few years ago, where I spent some time with Travis learning about his work working with lemurs. So it's always been a lot of fun, but I guess the constant in that has been carrying my binoculars everywhere I go, making the time to sit and watch with those binoculars, and then questioning what I see when I see an interesting behavior. And some animals have remarkable behaviors, like elephants, for instance. Elephants are always doing something. They're always pushing each other around. They're always wrapping trunks around trunks. They're always feeding. They're kicking grass roots out of the ground, and then they shake the dirt off the grass and then eat it, or they're using their tusks as tools to push the bark off trees. And when you watch that kind of behavior, every time you see a new behavior or a different behavior, you learn a little bit more about what makes an elephant tick. And I think that's what I've enjoyed about watching any of the wildlife I'm situated near. Last week I was in Banff, which is a big park just to the west of the city here in the Rocky Mountains. And right now, all of the elk the males are competing for females. So there's all kinds of really interesting interactions. Elk with their huge antlers, the males, the bucks, they do this unbelievable bugle call first thing in the morning or right at the end of the day. And it's their way of showing the females in the area that I'm the strong guy and you should look at me as maybe being the one to mate with. And so there's all of this behavior going on right now in the Rocky Mountains. And last week we were privileged enough to sit and watch some of that behavior for a while. And even right now, I look out my window here and I see squirrels. I keep my binoculars really handy when I'm sitting at my desk. If something goes on outside, then I'm quickly able to see what's happening. And I've got some squirrels out there right now. I just hung my bird feeder, and I have birds. I've had chickadees and nuthatches on the bird feeders all morning. Earlier on, I had a flicker, which is a type of woodpecker, and I actually was successful in having a flicker nest in my backyard this last summer. So nature can come right into our backyard. All you have to do is make the time to spend the time to look at it. And when you start watching it and you see all these interesting behaviors, you start to ask questions about what those behaviors are, and it just makes it that much more interesting. Now, I have a very interesting 1 minute long video. Do you guys want to see it? Yeah. Does that sound good? So let's try this now. This is my first time. Okay, good. Thank you for that. This is my first time doing the Google Hangout. And so I'm going to show you a very short, it's only 1 minute long, and hopefully the sound will come across and work well, because I understand there could be a bit of a lag. And if it doesn't work, then we won't do another one. But let's try this one. And it's a 1 minute video that I've produced on lemurs. And I didn't know Travis would be on part of this program today, but I think he'll quite enjoy this one. So I think, Travis, I click on screen share first.
Yeah, that's right. You should get the video going, and then or click on screen share, then get your video going.
Okay. And then when I click on screen share, then there's a desktop Google Hangouts.
Yeah.
I just click.
Binoculars. Yeah, he's passionate. I'm telling that a lot by listening to him.
Okay.
About how passionate he is about.
There we go. And then if you push play, it should work.
At the end of this trail is a life experience that is unbelievable.
Follow me. I'm looking for the largest member of the lemur family, an endangered species called the indri. Living high in the trees and leaping great distances, the indri is a beautiful sight. But what really makes them special is their singing. With their supersized vocal sacs, these living, breathing, air raid sirens can be heard for miles. In fact, they are one of the loudest mammals on the planet. They are so loud, close exposure could actually cause hearing loss. Now this is an audio experience. Connect with nature. Isn't that cool? Did that work, you guys?
Thumbs up.
Okay,
Perfect.
good.
Awesome.
Good, good, good. Okay, well, that just gives you an idea. That's going to air this weekend on television. So you guys were the first to see it. But the indri is just one example. The indri is a type of primate. So they're related to us from a long time ago. But it's a type of primate that lives out there, only found in Madagascar. How many already knew that? How many knew that lemurs are only found in Madagascar? Okay, good. I figured you guys would know your lemurs. That's excellent. So
Hey, Brian, if you could turn off your screen share.
okay. I'm not sure how. Oh, there it is. Okay, is that off?
Yeah. Off, but we lost your camera.
Did that work?
It worked, but we lost your camera.
Oh. So you can't see me. I wonder why.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, good. Okay.
Okay, guys.
So I have some other videos to show you. But maybe what I should do is take some questions. Now things are sounding really good. And any thoughts on why that's happening, Travis? Or now it's okay. Maybe what we should do is take some questions. Or how would you like to do this, Travis?
Yeah, great. Let's take some questions from some people in the class before Brian continues. Let's go with I just have first names here. Let's see. This might be actually Mrs. Robinson's class. Do you guys have a question? Come on up to the screen. Come say hello to Brian and ask your question.
Hello.
Hello.
How many types of lemurs are there?
Oh my gosh. You know what? When I first started teaching at the university, they thought there was only about 25 species of lemurs. But ever since, that was about 20 years ago. And ever since they decided that might be about the right number, then people like Travis and his wife have been going in to very remote parts of Madagascar. They've been taking blood samples from lemurs, and they've been using the blood samples to do DNA analysis, and they've been figuring out that there are new species of lemurs. They now think there's over 100 species. But the indri, which is the one that I just showed you, is the loudest of all the lemurs. They've got incredible vocal cords. And the reason why they make that call is to make sure there's other family groups nearby that aren't going to compete for food. So they try to figure out where everybody else is, and then they travel to locations where they won't bump into other family groups. That's why they make all that noise. But lemurs are amazing. Good question. Thank you.
All right, the class that I have up right now, do you guys have a question? Anybody there? Do you guys see me? Do you have a question? This would be Stuart's class. No? Okay, let's go on to, oh, you got a question? Yeah, great.
Don't stand there. Are we muted? We're good?
No, you're on.
Go in.
How do you help animals thrive?
How do I help animals thrive?
Yeah.
Okay, well, you know, one of the things when I was your age, I'm hearing another echo in there. When I was your age, I started by just learning about animals. So, and of course, taking my binoculars out there in the field and watching the animals, which encouraged me to go out and learn even more about animals. So that's where it all started. And then when I got into working and actually working for a living with animals, my whole job was to get people excited about animals. So I talked about them. So I went on radio shows and television shows and in front of classrooms like your classroom. And then I developed a whole team of people to help me do exactly that. So my job was really a job of education and inspiration. Then when I started working in charge of the conservation fund at the Calgary Zoo, and I started raising money and giving that money to people all around the world that were doing good conservation work. So I tried to help people that were already in the field doing work. Essentially, my job was to raise money and develop programs and then encourage those programs to thrive out in the wild. Our biggest and most exciting program was one that we developed in North Africa, where I actually went into the wilds with a very skilled staff member of mine, and we both set up a program to help hippos. And we set up a park, essentially. We made a community park because there was this population of hippopotamus, and in West Africa, hippopotamus are almost extinct. And so when they found this population, the locals knew the population of hippos was there all along. But when it became apparent that this population of hippos could be under threat, we set in motion a program to develop a park. So since then, the hippos have survived, and that's been very good. And the fact that the hippos are still there, it's created a way for the local people to make jobs and make money. Tourists come in to the park, and they actually stay there in a lodge, and that's all run by the local people. So that's how we help animals thrive. We make it so it actually helps the local people. It's called community conservation, because if you ignore the people, the wildlife will disappear. I was just in southern Zimbabwe, and we were at a park where a very good friend of mine, who I've supported for years and years with his conservation work through money that I've raised here in North America, he has created a situation where the local people are actually now making and getting jobs with tourists that are coming into the park. So instead of poaching the animals now, they're protecting the animals, and they're actually making a living from it. So that's one way that I do it. But thank you for that question.
Great. Now, how about Mrs. Huddy's class? Do you guys have a question?
Hello, Mrs. Huddy.
Hi, how are you? Nice
Very good. Wonderful to see you and to see your class. This is great.
And we have some students from last year who helped find you. They're here. They wanted to join. They couldn't miss you.
Okay, well, that's great.
Okay.
Did you help the lemurs at the Calgary Zoo?
Well, you know, the lemur exhibit now has been built since I left the Calgary Zoo, but I hear the lemurs all the time because I can actually see the exhibit from where I'm sitting in my house, because I live right across the river from the zoo. So I can look over it and see the lemur exhibit, and I can hear the lemurs. We had a pair of black and white ruffed lemurs. Sadly, one of the I think the female died. So there's no communication now. But all summer long, I heard them arguing over food or over sitting spots or just vocalizing, and it's been wonderful. But now I help promote the lemur exhibit and on the radio and television to get people to come down and visit.
All right. What about, let's see, who do we have here? Mrs. Oulay's class? Yeah.
Pardon me?
Do you guys have a question for Brian?
Mrs. Huddy's class again?
No, not Mrs. Huddy's. We're just moving on to the next one I've got on the screen here.
Okay, I'll mute.
Thank you. All right. Oh, we don't hear you. We've got to unmute your camera. Let's see if I can find you. Let's try that. How about that? Yeah, go ahead. Nope, still don't hear you. No, it says you're muted. I'm trying to unmute you. No, we're gonna come back to that class. We'll see if we can get that to go again. Let's see here, Mrs. Edgars' class. Do you guys have a question?
Hi, my name's Gabe. What was your first trip?
Oh my gosh, my first trip. How old are you?
9.
9. I was probably about your age when I did my first trip, and my father took me out camping, and we stayed in a tent in a bird reserve, and I can still remember it. I can still remember opening up the tent early in the morning with the early morning light shining through the forest, and there was a rabbit out in the little grassy meadow right in front, and we even saw a deer that weekend, and I still remember that. That was probably my very first trip, although I think we went camping even before that when I was even younger. But I suppose we moved from Canada down to the United States for a period of time. And so I guess I was only 5 years old then. So that would have been my first really big trip, because we drove across Canada and the United States to get to where we were going to live for a while. And then 11 years later, we moved back to Canada. But I started the travel program at the Calgary Zoo about 35 years ago, actually. And so that would have been my first trip, my first big trip where I was actually leading trips. And then I've been leading trips ever since to various places all around the world. Earlier this year, I was in the Galapagos Islands. And in fact, if you'd like to see a little video, I could show you a video from the Galapagos Islands. But I was in the Galapagos Islands, and then I just got back from Zimbabwe now, and I was also up in Churchill in northern Manitoba to see the beluga whales during the summer, which was really exciting. And in January, I'm back to Africa, and then later on in the year, I'm down to the Antarctic. So I travel a lot, and I always bring my binoculars, of course, and I always spend lots of time looking around and questioning what I see. But thank you for that question.
Here, if we got another question from, is this Mrs. Winteringham's class, I think? Do you guys have a question?
You know, Travis, I saw a typewritten question pop up when I was speaking, but it disappeared again.
Let's see here.
I think it was from the class that couldn't.
Okay, I got one. Yes. So the one that without the microphone. Great. The question was, what's your favorite place and that you've visited so far?
You know, I always have to say that my favorite place that I visited so far is the last place I visited, which was just a couple days ago. I was just out in our Rocky Mountains here. I was at an environmental conference for 3 days where I spoke at, and that's where I went and saw the elk. And it just reminded me how much we have in Canada, how much we have in our backyard. There's so much to see. We don't really have to go a long ways away. We can just explore what we've got right near home. And I suppose that's one of the main lessons I've learned in life. There's what I like to do is get totally involved with each place that I go and visit. So when I go and visit a new location or an old location that I've been to many times, I always try to be involved in the moment. And the way I do that is by using my binoculars, sitting quietly, watching, or walking quietly, or with my wife, and or with a small group of like-minded people, and we explore together. And that's so. I think that's probably the best answer I could give. But thank you for that question.
Wonderful. Do we have any other questions? Were any classes missed? Looks like everyone asked a question. If you wanted to show your video, Brian, I bet you they'd love that.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I'll do. I have a video here I went into Uganda last year to look for chimpanzees, and what I'm going to do is narrate over the top of this video as it plays. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that should work. It just the video will be slightly slower than normal, but it'll be it should work out.
Okay, let's try it. I'm going to take you to see the chimpanzees in Gombe. First of all, it's a very short video. It's only 3 minutes long. And then we're going to go into the Kabale Forest, which, Travis, I believe you've traveled in the Kabale Forest, haven't you?
No, sadly, I haven't. Not yet.
Okay, well, it's a place you got to put on your list because it's primate rich. So let's take you first of all to Gombe, and then for a short look at some of the chimpanzees. To get to Gombe National Park, that's the famous park that Jane Goodall has been studying chimpanzees in for the past 40 years plus. And to get there, you have to go by boat down Lake Tanganyika. So I'll click on screen share first, and then desktop, I believe. I'll start screen share, and then I'll click on Chimps of Gombe. So there we go. Does that work?
Yeah, you just need to make it bigger.
Okay. Does that work?
Sure does.
Is that too big?
No, that's great.
Okay, these are the shores of Lake Tanganyika, and that's where Jane Goodall studies. And she is of course, a wonderful, well-known conservationist, and she spent many decades here. These are the baboons that live in the camp. They don't feed them any food. That's food that the baboon got. Look at the older brother is giving that poor little guy a hard time. The baboons live naturally around the camp, but they never feed them anything. Now, chimpanzee hiking can be very, very difficult. We're hot on the trail. And when I say we're hot on the trail, I wasn't kidding. It was a very hot day. We found chimpanzees that day, but the next day, it was fantastic. So we're right behind the chimps, and we found the chimps in a fairly open part of the national park. There's our first look at a little baby, and you'll see more of him in a moment. And then the chimps led us down into this deep ravine that was thick with vegetation. And there we encountered Sandy, a chimpanzee I had spent time with 30 years earlier. And Sandy now was teaching her baby, this 8-year-old youngster, how to fish for termites. So Jane Goodall was made famous because she was the first one to witness chimpanzees making tools and using them. And then a female walked past us with this little tiny baby. And she walked right in front of us and then past us, and we quietly then started to follow her. And she went to a fairly wide open trail. I laid down on my belly. I used my hat as a tripod for my camera, and we stood there and watched, and this is the video that I got. Look at that little baby. Look at his little mouth. Very comfortable in the lap of mom. And there's the waterfall that Jane Goodall has made famous in Gombe, a beautiful waterfall. Now we're in Uganda, and this is a very, very good, big population of chimpanzees. We're following a troop of about 100. We were there in the middle of the day. We had good rain gear, so when it started to rain, we just waited it out. And then we heard all this screaming and yelling of chimpanzees after the rainstorm and the lightning storm finished. And sure enough, we looked up in the trees, and with my spotting scope and my video camera, we noticed they had killed a colobus monkey. So hunting, and they just dropped the carcass. We're following you through the woods. So chimpanzees do hunt. There's the chimpanzee walking, climbing up a tree. Another chimpanzee, they got half the carcass of the colobus monkey that they had successfully hunted. And now they're going to eat it in peace away from the other chimpanzees. And a third chimpanzee followed, and I could see it begging off in the distance for a piece of food from the colobus monkey. Chimp watching at its best. And that's called a pant hoot. I have to, let me just, Okay, that's called a pant hoot. That chimpanzee that you heard screaming at the end there. But we didn't witness the actual hunt, but we heard the after effects of it. The chimpanzees were screaming and yelling because they were so excited they were going to get to eat some meat. And it took years before Jane Goodall actually witnessed that type of thing in the wild. So we felt very fortunate. We were extremely lucky to see that kind of behavior. So that was very, very exciting. But I'm going to show you now a video that's going to air this weekend. It's about 4 minutes long, and the other one worked okay. Hey, Travis, it was narrated and you could understand it okay? Good. I'm going to show you this one. And this video, much of the video in it, I shot 30 years ago with my very first, very primitive video camera. So you're going to see a young-looking man there. I sort of look like Travis. I was quite young, and I was new in the field, and I followed chimpanzees. My wife and I, you're going to see my wife in this video too, 30 years ago, where we met up with Jane Goodall. But it's an interesting story, and I think you'll enjoy it. So I'm going to put this back on screen share, and we'll start this video. Oops, sorry. That was the same one. Here it is right here. I've been a fan of Jane Goodall since I was a kid, when I first saw her on a National Geographic special in my own living room. She was and still is, in my books, a conservation superstar. After spending decades with chimpanzees in Tanzania, her groundbreaking research changed how we think about these amazing animals. In 1987, I booked Dr. Goodall for her first speaking engagement in Western Canada. Well, following the event, my wife and I took Jane hiking, being just naturalists out there in the wilds. When I dropped her off at the airport, she invited us to come and visit her in Gombe. I said, "Are you serious?" She said, "Yes, of course." Well, how can you turn down an opportunity like that? 6 months later, we were in Tanzania, working our way across the country to go and visit Jane Goodall. It was a remarkable week. We tagged along with Jane and her research assistants, following chimps from dawn until dusk. Jane pioneered the practice of naming chimps rather than assigning them numbers, and we spent a lot of time with members from the famous F family of chimps, including one very special character named Frodo, named for the pint-sized humble hobbit in Lord of the Rings. Frodo had grown to be larger and stronger than any of his peers. He also had a nasty reputation to go with his size, and he didn't just bully chimps. He'd been known to get physical with humans, too. Lucky me, I seemed to attract Frodo's attention. Maybe it was my camera, maybe it was because I wasn't wearing a shirt, but eventually Frodo thought it was important to show me who was boss.
It was one of the best experiences I've ever had.
It was all over very quickly, and it left a few marks. But all in all, I found the experience thrilling. One of the best experiences I've ever had. Jane told me that Frodo might approach, and if he does, make sure that your camera strap is around your neck. Make sure that you don't let him get anything, because if he gets it, he's going to take off with it. But Frodo wasn't finished with me. A bit later, he approached me again, only this time the results were quite different. He pulled my head down, and he started to groom the back of my neck. And I could feel his lips going through my hair. My heart was absolutely pounding with excitement. So I put my hand around, and he grabbed my hand and put it on his tummy, which was stretched as tight as a drum. And then I started to groom Frodo. And Frodo calmed down right away, and his lower lip relaxed and drooped down. It just blew me away. I was just overwhelmed with excitement. It ultimately ended in the most incredible content. Words will never do this moment justice. Recently, I received word that Frodo had passed away. For 37 years, he was a huge presence in Gombe, a dominant hunter, fighter, and alpha male. Gombe won't feel the same with Frodo gone, but I can guarantee he'll never be forgotten. Isn't that exciting? Yeah, let's just... Okay, good, good. Yeah, so that was very exciting, and that's going to air this weekend on National Geographic TV in Canada. So very exciting to see. But I thought what I should do is probably show you kind of a little short summary of the kind of conservation work that I've been at, and then maybe we can take a few more questions. Does that sound good, Travis? Okay, here we go. I'm going to screen share again. I've searched this entire planet for the best nature experiences. Since I was a little kid, I've had an interest in the outdoors. It's just drawn me for some reason. We're involved in too much on a day-to-day basis. Nature slows you down, forces you to think, forces you to look. Come with me. This is going to blow your mind. It's an opportunity to rediscover what makes us human. It puts us in touch with the earth and the air and the water and things that are green. It's the call of nature permeates your whole body and makes you vibrate. When you're traveling, you live the moment. All of those moments just remind us how vibrant this world still is. We hear a lot about how nature is coming to an end. But the world I see is still a green world. If you look, there are still vast tracts of uncut forest that has never heard the sound of a chainsaw. There are still oceanic regimes that are as abundant as they ever were. Those places still exist. The nature is out there, and if we let it get within us, it can change our attitude and change our perspective, I think, on life and even how we view ourselves. It's the opportunity to get out there and enjoy what planet Earth still has to offer. This quest is all about discovery. Nature is powerful. Nature can be very cruel. We're about to experience nature at its best. Want to come along for the ride? So there we go. I'm not sure how to turn screen share off now. Is it off? Okay, good. So I thought I would just show you that, just to sort of maybe that will stimulate some other questions. Should we go back to the classes, Travis?
Sounds good. All right, let's start with, for this class here, do you guys have another question? This would be, yeah, come on up.
Go. Unmuted.
Have you always wanted to be going on adventures and watching animals in their habitat? And what made you want to do that job?
Well, I guess. Okay. It's all echoey again. Oh, there you go. Yeah, you know, when I started bird watching, when I started at age 12, getting out into the forest and sitting quietly and watching nature, that's what started it all, just like I said before. And one thing led to the other. I never had a real plan. It's just that I took opportunities when they were given to me. So when I had an opportunity to go for a hike in the forest, I took that opportunity. Or when I had an opportunity to go camping, I took that opportunity. And eventually, I was working in a job when I finished high school, but every weekend I was hiking. And I thought, I've got to somehow figure out a way to make it so that my everyday life is what I really, really enjoy. And so that's when I went back to college, and I learned, and I started taking classes, and I found college really interesting because they were all people like me, people that liked to be outside, that liked to explore, that liked to discover, that would take their binoculars and go and sit in the forest and wait for stuff. And so I guess that's where it all started. And then I had an opportunity where I found out that you could actually make a living by talking about nature. And eventually that got me at the zoo. And then the rest is history. I met Travis, we went traveling. Travis now is doing his thing with lemurs, and I'm doing my thing with television and leading trips, and it's all working very well. Thank you for that question.
How about, I think this is Miss Robinson's class. Do you guys have another question?
Hello.
Hi.
I was wondering, do chimpanzees? Chimpanzees. I can't say that. I'm just gonna say chimpanzees. Do they only live in Africa?
Yes, yeah, chimpanzees are only found in Africa, and only in good forested areas in the central part of Africa and part of East Africa, Uganda, Tanzania, and parts of the Congo, places like that. So you have to find good quality forests to find where chimpanzees live. If there's another question, we can do that right away from the classroom. Yes, right in the middle of the class there. How about you? Yeah, you. The one with the blue shirt on and the green on the front of the blue shirt. Yeah, you. Come on over. What's your name?
Justin.
Hi, Justin.
I was wondering, what is your favorite animal?
You know, Justin, I get that question a lot, and just like my favorite place to travel, I have to say my favorite animal is usually the animal that I'm watching. So if I'm out watching a ground squirrel gathering grass seeds, that's my favorite squirrel at that moment. Last week, my favorite animal was the elk that I was watching in Banff. But I have to say, Justin, I love animals that have complex behaviors. So I like the primates because they're always doing something. And primates are always involved with each other. They're always super involved with their environment. They're always feeding or looking, or there's sometimes politics going on. I love watching that, and I love experiencing that and trying to decipher what they're doing. But elephants are the same way. There are certain animals that have this magical ability to interact with each other. Whales are the same way. I love whales. In fact, I'm going down to the Antarctic in early March specifically for a whale watching trip. And so I'm one of the guides on that trip. That's how I get around the world. I trained from your age onward. I was interested in nature, and now I go on holidays with other people telling them about nature. So it's actually, that's the work. That's part of the work that I do these days. I'm a tour guide. So I'm going down to look at whales because I really like the complex behaviors of whales. So I guess in answer to your question, I like animals that have depth to their personality and complex behaviors. But thank you for that question.
All right, how about this class here? I got this Miss Huddy's class, I think. Yeah.
Oh yes, Mrs. Huddy.
Okay, Josie.
What can we do at school to help the animals?
Oh, Josie, what a great question. You know, I think the first thing you can do to help the animals is learn about them. So an animal that you find that you have an interest in, learn about that animal and read up on it, and maybe do a little research project on it, just by looking up at what makes that animal tick, why it behaves the way it does. And I think the more that you learn about animals, the more it's going to become clear as to what you can do. And even right now, I know Jane Goodall has a program called Roots and Shoots. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but Roots and Shoots is an international program. Something like 45 countries are involved, and classrooms just like yours have become Roots and Shoots members. And Roots and Shoots, they help give you ideas, or you come up with ideas like planting trees in your schoolyard or in your own backyard, or setting up bird feeders, or learning about certain animals. Roots and Shoots is basically an umbrella organization operated by the Jane Goodall Institute of Canada, or other Jane Goodall Institutes. There's a Jane Goodall Institute in the United States as well. And they actually help and organize, or help children come up with good ideas, and that helps the environment. And so there's a lot of different ways you can go. It's planting trees to greening up your schoolyard, learning about animals, and maybe even ultimately writing our politicians to tell them what you would like to see happen in our still beautiful green backyard here in Alberta. Thank you for that question, Josie. I hope that helps.
You're welcome.
Sure, stand in front.
Wonderful. So we're just nearing the end here. Does anyone have any more questions for Brian while we still have him? We've got one here in Mrs. Huddy's class. We'll do one from each. So go ahead.
What place would you like to see that you haven't gone to?
Oh, a place, thank you for that question. A place that I've really wanted to go to is the high elevation areas in Mongolia. I think that would be very, very exciting to see some of those high elevation areas where there's huge mountains and big expansive plains and interesting people and interesting wildlife. But closer to home, a place that I'm going to next summer that I've always wanted to go to is the Labrador coastline. That's north of Newfoundland, and I'm actually going to be on a ship. The same ship that I use in the Antarctic will be sailing all the way up the coast of Labrador and visiting some of the most remote coastlines that really is the home of the polar bear. So that'll be very exciting. So there's always new places to explore. And even here in our own Alberta backyard, I can't wait for the next hike that I'm able to go on, or the next canoe trip. So thank you for that question.
Thank you.
All right. I see you have a question there.
What countries were your favorite to visit, and what animals did you see there that were interesting?
Oh my goodness, that's a very broad question. Yeah, boy, it's I keep going back to Africa for sure, but South America also is a tremendous place to visit. Of course, I can never talk about any of these places without saying that Canada is I'm a very proud Canadian, and I'm very happy with some of the experiences that I've had in Canada. But that's a hard question to answer, because it's there's so many beautiful parts of the world. The world is an amazing place. And what I've discovered about traveling around the world is that the world is not only very beautiful, but it's also a very friendly place. And I think sometimes our news media tells us all the bad stories, but there are so many good stories out there too. And I think that that's what I've really learned about traveling to these other places. Most people in the world are just like you and I. They want to enjoy a good life, and they want to have good experiences, and they want to have a good future. And I suppose that's what it's all about. I think that's what travel has taught me. So thank you for that question.
Okay, and then let's see. I think over here, it looks like you guys have one more question for Brian.
Maybe.
Have you had any injuries on any of your trips?
Have I had any injuries? Yeah, I think when you're out there all the time, yes, you do. There's some injuries that can happen. I stepped on a stingray once in South America. That hurt a lot. But you know, I think whenever I've gotten myself into difficult situations, it's always been my own fault. The worst injury I ever had was on my bicycle right near home. And I was hit by a car, but thank goodness I had a helmet on, or I wouldn't be sitting here in front of you guys talking to you today. So yeah, the trips, you know, I think the world is actually, like I said, a pretty safe place as long as you watch where you're going and you're careful. And whenever I've made a mistake and gotten injured, it's because I did something silly or stupid. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, another question. Might as well ask it while we have some time.
Are there any times that you don't want to go and explore and see the animals?
My goodness, are there any times? You know, I like coming home from all of these trips. I love being away. And when I'm away, I'm often away for a month or a month and a half at a time. So I go away for long chunks of time. But it's amazing. When I'm away, I don't really think about coming home. Although when a day or two before I have to get on the airplane and start flying, then my brain starts to switch around and I start thinking about home. And I love coming home. And I love spending time at home. I love spending time on my bicycle, bicycling around the river. I love spending time watching the mergansers out here on the river. I live right on the river, so I'm very lucky. I have a lot of wildlife that goes up and down the river. And so I just try to enjoy all of these moments. But I must admit, I have it in my blood to go and explore. And that's what I've been doing since I was your age. And it's just something that I enjoy more and more every time I go. But thank you for that question.
Well, everyone, I want to thank Brian for his time. And if you guys don't mind giving a big shout out to Brian and saying thank you to him for all the effort that he's done and the talk he's given. All right, great.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thanks,
All right,
guys.
So that's been another Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, this time with Brian Keating from Going Wild. You can follow him on goingwild.org and check out all his next adventures. Look for him on Canadian National Geographic. And thank you again, Brian. That was amazing.
Travis, thank you so much. That was a lot of fun having you as the host.
Wonderful. Thank you.